There is now a case established in Leh. A few days ago, there was a report that emanated from a test that was done by PNG Institute of Medical Research that did indicate possibility of a person infected.
That was in March. Since then, PNG has been in overdrive, a flurry of activity that started off quite slow at first between individual agencies struggling to work cohesively before snowballing into the formation of the National Operations Center, NOC-19. NOC-19 coordinating all efforts in the COVID-19 fight that subsequently has led to the new normal. The health sector has been the vanguard, the blade on the edge of the knife. The first responders have been filled with anxiety on their capabilities in handling this on such an unprecedented scale. In February, discussions were slowly coming to fruition between the National Department of Health and the World Health Organization. Now Deputy State Controller Dr. Paisen Dakulala had been concerned about the lack of a cohesive effort between agencies involved. That push led to an amalgamation which included the Health Department, Defense Force, the police, transport, aviation and shipping, as well as a juxtapose of assorted agencies in both the government and private sector. Funding was rushed through for various projects that would include testing and isolation facilities, and the Medical Research Institute, which for years had been relatively low-key, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight. That light, though, showing the glaring weaknesses that had for so long been overlooked within PNG's public health sector. Understaffed and rundown facilities, medicinal supplies lacking, outdated equipment, rural outposts neglected by unpaid staff. The nurses in Leh's Engau Hospital were the first to revolt. Soon after, questions about the alien health sector were raised from various slices of society, all with predominantly the same question. Why now? Why did it take a pandemic of global proportions to put PNG in its place? Those questions acknowledged by Prime Minister James Marape, who said, "We must focus on the now." From the Health Department, a butterfly effect would occur, influencing almost all aspects of life in Papua New Guinea. One of those being education. Directions from the Department of Education and Minister Joseph Yopi Yopi were issued a few weeks ago for schools nationwide to return to normal on the 9th of June 2020, with the Education Secretary also issuing administrative instructions to all schools under the National Education System on the resumption of classes, revised term dates, and national examination dates. All schools are to review and reprogram their teaching and learning programs to cover lost lessons by adding additional periods, including takeaway homework and other suitable strategies. But receiving instructions and following them are two different sides of the coin. Schools have also been directed to comply with the new normal coronavirus prevention and control protocols. Schools themselves, from elementary to tertiary institutions, especially in government-run centers, have had themselves problems over the years in terms of funding. When the TFF was introduced in 2010, education administrators then had abolished school fee payments with subsidies received from the government for allocated projects. They took time, and schools struggled to cope with an influx of numbers without adequate resource materials. The new protocols placing even more strain on an already disgruntled workforce.
So if you go to the classroom, you will see how many students in a class. It's really a good number because it's manageable. But again, we have challenges to put up more work and give more pressure to students to complete.
These students will grow up, develop their own ideals of how to live, and some may even revert to the informal sector, relying on the land itself to make a living as is being done in agriculture. COVID-19 has forced PNG to look within itself. During APEC 2018, there had been a focus on food security, with a streamlining of efforts into a production and supply chain that would enable a more efficient process of food being delivered to consumers and a steady income stream and trade in return. And until coronavirus turned up, work had been quietly progressing. But it hasn't been easy to achieve. In May of this year, the Farmers and Settlers Association raised concerns on lessons and implications of COVID-19 and state of emergency on food security and agriculture production and food processing and exports. They stated that supply chains had been affected on the restrictions of the movement of people, which in turn created a shortage of food, including locally manufactured goods and farm products to urban centers. Some of these, addressed by individual entrepreneurs themselves, though reports had surfaced of food spoilage due to delayed delivery.
We have all kinds of produce. Some are cow, some are taro, and some are carrots and vegetables and fruits. Basically, the fruits and vegetables.
Now, however, with a refocus on looking within, those efforts have been accelerated, with international trade brought to an almost standstill over the past few months. Trade internationally, tourism locally. 2019 had by far seen the largest growth in PNG's tourism sector dating back since 1995, the largest number of visitors outside of Australia being from China and the Philippines respectively. To say that has dropped would be a vast understatement. The country's tourism sector had been buoyed by lower fuel prices, cheaper fares, and better attractions for international visitors, each contributing to ensure PNG's tourism trade was a multi-million kina venture, and more importantly, bringing in foreign currency with a direct injection into, firstly, the local economies of each area that played host, and the national economy as a whole. Tourism operators are now suffering with no new boosts in numbers. And what will suffer now? The PNG economy. Last month, Dr. Osborne Sanida of the PNG National Research Institute had disseminated an issues paper with a comparison on the budgets and supplementary budgets presented in Parliament. In it were alarming statistics on PNG's expenditure.
But when people earn an income and they go and spend, government also collects tax from the GST. So that is why it is important to generate jobs, to create income opportunities.
Because here is where it becomes tricky. Public servants earn set wages from the national government through the various bodies through which they are employed. Business and corporate PNG is where real capital is brought in by those individual organizations with entrepreneurship and commercial acumen valued directly. And that caused yet another issue. At the end of May, the major trade unions hit out at the government.
And then, even if they lose employment as a result of COVID-19, they will draw from their savings. This savings is their long-term savings. And that's the disparity that is now happening between public and private.
This situation, COVID-19 now, it's not been planned for. The rainy days that we prepare for it. We save our 50 aside. This is a natural disaster. Now, 5.6 million, we haven't seen any state-owned enterprises budgeted in there. Who are we? Who are the public servants? Harim, that 5.6, you tell me, you break it down properly. We make that money, we will sweat to make sure that we recover that money in the coming years.
The private sector unofficially reported laying off of staff in order to cut back on losses. Downsizing occurred across the board. Job loss means no wages. No wage, from a government revenue collection perspective, means no tax. No tax means no spending. Research in 2017 showed that Papua New Guinea had a population growth rate of 3.1% per annum. Add that with a 50% literacy rate based on low levels of education across the country, and you can see it reflects clearly in employment rates. And while various governments since independence have been accused of spending too much, job creation has always been at the forefront of every successive administration till now. COVID-19 has unemployed more people here than any other calamity in PNG's history. An unemployed population is a frustrated one. And now, with a 10th confirmed case, that frustration has manifested itself, in some cases violently. EMTV News over the past few weeks reporting on domestic violence and murder within a supposedly safe environment, leaving a frustrated audience querying what the real SOE should be. The risk at hand is that if so much focus is on COVID-19 and the new normal, attention is driven away from other issues that are and have been affecting Papua New Guinea and its people, and if left unchecked, only serves to worsen our already dire straits.